What was that? Did you see it? Something just moved in the water. And whatever it is, it's getting closer, and it looks hungry. What could it be? Where did it come from? And why is it such a terrifying threat to humans? This is What Ifs, and today we're diving into a world where the Titanoboa still exists. Roughly 60 million years ago, one of the Paleocene's most fearsome predators slithered stealthily through the waters of South America. This massive serpent, discovered in Colombia, is officially known as Titanoboa ceruginoensis. With a staggering length of 15 meters and a weight of over 1,000 kilograms, it dwarfs even the largest modern-day anacondas. Imagine standing next to it. If you're of average height, its 1 meter girth would reach your waist. Fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, you'd be most likely to encounter a Titanoboa when you're either hunting for fish or taking a swim. It all comes down to physics. Just like whales, larger creatures move far more efficiently in water than on land. While this colossal snake never had the agility to live in trees like some of its modern relatives, it could occasionally venture inland when needed. Scientists speculate that Titanoboa belongs to the Boidae family, non-venomous snakes, which might sound like good news at first. But don't let that fool you. Titanoboas had a gruesome way of taking down their prey. Their teeth, shaped like curved hooks, would latch onto their victim, ensuring that any struggle only caused the prey to get hooked deeper. Then came the squeeze, a death grip that restricted blood flow to the heart and brain, leading to oxygen deprivation and ultimately suffocation. Fossil evidence shows that a Titanoboa's lower jaw extended beyond the back of its skull, giving it an incredible range of motion when opening its mouth. This meant it could swallow prey whole, much like today's pythons and anacondas. And what was on the menu? Giant turtles and primitive crocodiles, some as large as 6 meters. But to sustain its enormous body, this snake needed to consume around 40 kilograms of food daily, twice the intake of the biggest anacondas today. With that kind of appetite, could humans be an easy snack? Well, in places like Australia, people already coexist with deadly snakes, but a Titanoboa would be in an entirely different league. Its sheer massiveness would make it unlike anything we've ever encountered. Titanoboas thrived in hot, humid jungle environments, just like the Amazon. Being cold-blooded, they relied on external heat sources to survive. Around 58 million years ago, Earth's temperatures were about 5 degrees Celsius warmer than today, making it the perfect climate for these massive reptiles. If they still roamed the planet, they might not just be confined to South America. Asia could be a prime habitat. Or perhaps even Florida, where the heat and humidity persist for much of the year. Thanks to its enormous size, comparable to a small car, a Titanoboa would likely lurk in hot, swampy waters or lakes, making it a highly efficient ambush predator. Imagine playing a round of golf in Florida, only to find one of these creatures lurking by a water hazard, waiting for its next meal. And if alligators weren't available that day, what's the next best option? Well, golfers. But is there any upside to having a Titanoboa around? Surprisingly, yes. Pest control would never be a problem again. Raccoons, deer, or anything rummaging through your garbage would quickly disappear with one of these massive snakes on the prowl. So, is a world with Titanoboa something we should fear, or something we could adapt to? That's a question for another What Ifs. Taller than a 6-story building, longer than 3 school buses, and 10 times as heavy as an elephant, the largest dinosaur ever is making a comeback from extinction. But what would it be like to walk among these prehistoric giants? Could we possibly tame them? And how much damage would they cause to human civilization? This is What Ifs, and today we're imagining a world where Argentinosaurus is alive. Back in 1987, a farmer in southwestern Argentina made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the paleontology community: 6 enormous bones that belonged to what would later be identified as the largest dinosaur ever found. This giant, known as Argentinosaurus, or the Argentine lizard, lived during the Middle Cretaceous period, about 90 million years ago. These herbivorous sauropods were plant eaters, but their sheer size was beyond comprehension. They started their lives weighing a mere 5 kilograms, but over the next 40 years, they would balloon to 75,000 kilograms. That's right, these dinosaurs were gaining around 40 kilograms per day at their peak. And with such massive growth, they had an insatiable appetite, requiring 100,000 calories daily. So, if Argentinosaurus were still alive today, could they wipe out our plant life entirely? Well, if they managed to reclaim their old stomping grounds in South America, they would be in for a shock. The ecosystem has changed dramatically over the last millions of years, and it's unlikely that they'd find the same lush vegetation they once relied on. But that wouldn't stop them from trying. With their voracious plant-based diet, they could strip entire forests bare, reshaping our world in ways we might not be able to control. And the problems wouldn't stop there. Along with their eating habits, these creatures would bring destruction everywhere they roamed. Paleontologists estimate that Argentinosaurus stood at 17 meters tall and stretched 35 meters long, a size so immense that scientists still wonder how they managed to support their own weight. Their hearts would have needed to pump blood up to 12 meters at a rate of 50 to 60 beats per minute just to keep them moving. Now, imagine a creature this large casually strolling through a modern city. It wouldn't even have to be aggressive to cause destruction. Buildings, roads, and entire neighborhoods could be reduced to rubble just by its footsteps. It would be like Godzilla, only without the intentional destruction, just pure, accidental chaos. And, of course, Argentinosaurus wouldn't be a solitary creature. They were likely herd animals, meaning you wouldn't just see one. You'd see dozens of them. And when they nested, they could lay anywhere from 10 to 15 eggs at a time. These weren't your average chicken eggs either. They were 30 centimeters in diameter, about the size of a basketball. With no natural predators, their population could explode until South America was completely overrun by these massive herbivores. So, could we tame them, use them for labor, or perhaps even as a means of transportation? In theory, elephants have been trained for centuries, so why not Argentinosaurus? Well, the problem is their sheer size. Keeping them in captivity would require enormous resources. The amount of land, food, and water they would need would be unfathomable, and the conditions we'd have to keep them in would likely be inhumane. Letting them roam freely wouldn't be an option either, not unless we were okay with them trampling over entire cities. So, the only solution would be containment, but even that poses a massive challenge. Electric fences might work since Argentinosaurus lacked natural body armor, making them vulnerable to shocks. But if they moved in herds, as paleontologists suspect, we'd need miles of fences just to keep them contained. And even if we managed to do that, poachers would quickly become a threat, eager to hunt the largest game known to man. In the end, bringing back the largest dinosaurs would likely lead to yet another failed human attempt to control nature. Maybe, just maybe, we'd finally meet our match with a prehistoric creature that sees us as the real invaders. And if that wasn't bad enough, what if T-Rex suddenly made a comeback? That's a question for another what ifs. Could extinction have truly wiped out every prehistoric giant? Or is there a monster still lurking in our oceans? No, we're not talking about the Loch Ness Monster or the Megalodon. We're talking about a creature you may have never even heard of, the mosasaur. But what exactly is a mosasaur? Could it have somehow survived the Great Extinction Event? And if it did, how would that have changed the world's oceans? This is What Ifs, and today we're diving deep into a reality where Mosasaurus is still alive. Back in 2014, a British tourist on a cruise in the Gulf of Mexico spotted something strange in the water. The mysterious sighting quickly became known as the Carnival Cruise Monster, and some descriptions sounded eerily similar to a long-extinct apex predator, the mosasaur. But let's be real. If Mosasaurus had somehow survived the mass extinction event that wiped out 3/4 of all species on Earth, we would definitely know about it. This prehistoric beast would have completely reshaped the oceans, altering marine ecosystems and human activity at sea. In fact, if the mosasaur were still out there, it's possible that the megalodon, the infamous giant shark, might never have evolved at all. But how could a single species have such an enormous impact? To understand that, we need to take a closer look at this nightmarish marine predator. Mosasaurs weren't just giant lizards, They were the apex predators of their time, similar to modern-day killer whales, but far more terrifying. Imagine a massive sea monster with the double-hinged jaw of a snake, razor-sharp teeth, and a shark-like tail built for speed. And as if that wasn't scary enough, some species of Mosasaurus could reach up to 18 meters in length. That's 4 meters longer than a standard yellow school bus. And what did they eat? Well, anything they wanted. Fish, dolphins, sharks, whales, and even other mosasaurs were all fair game. Their dominance wasn't limited to one region either. Fossil evidence shows that these lizard kings ruled the oceans across every continent, including Antarctica. But they weren't always this terrifying. Their ancestors were more like marine iguanas, similar to the ones found in the Galapagos Islands today. Around 90 million years ago, some of these lizards ventured into the ocean in search of food. At first, they stayed close to the shore, but as millions of years passed, they evolved into powerful swimmers, developing longer tails, stronger limbs, and faster movements. Eventually, they left the coastline behind, transforming into true sea creatures. However, unlike fish, they still needed to surface for air, much like modern dolphins and whales. It only took about 27 million years for the Jurassic Park-sized mosasaur to evolve, but let's be honest, the one in the movie is not exactly accurate. While real mosasaurs weren't quite as monstrous as their Hollywood counterpart, they were still some of the most dangerous creatures to ever exist. Now, if they were alive today, the ocean as we know it would be drastically different. For starters, many of the marine species we recognize today, including sharks, whales, and seals, might not exist at all. Mosasaurs were so dominant that they would have likely outcompete or wiped out many modern predators. Instead, fish and marine mammals would have evolved differently, developing specialized adaptations just to avoid becoming prey. There's even a scientific basis for this idea. One ecological theory suggests that predators drive evolution because they force their prey to adapt quickly. In fact, a 2007 study found that the diversity of marine creatures over hundreds of millions of years is directly linked to interactions between predators and prey. So, if Mosasaurus had survived, we might actually see an even more diverse ocean ecosystem today, one shaped by millions of years of intense evolutionary pressure. But what about us? How would humans be affected? Well, for starters, the ocean would be a far more dangerous place. Forget about casual boating trips or relaxing beach vacations. If mosasaurs were still around, you'd think twice before stepping into the water. Smaller boats, like fishing vessels and sailboats, would be at risk of being swallowed whole. Popular ocean activities like swimming, surfing, and diving would no longer be safe, and coastal cities would have to adapt their defenses to keep these giant sea monsters at bay. And who knows? Maybe even the story of Moby Dick wouldn't have been about a great white whale, but instead, a fearsome mosasaur, a true sea monster capable of devouring ships whole. So, perhaps it's a good thing that mosasaurs are long gone. If they had somehow survived extinction, our world's oceans would be completely unrecognizable and far less friendly for humans. But if a mosasaur could have survived, what's to say other prehistoric creatures couldn't as well? Could pterodactyls still be soaring in the skies, waiting for the right moment to reclaim their domain? That's a question for another what-ifs. How amazing would it be to see a real-life T-Rex? If only that one fatal asteroid had never collided with Earth, would dinosaurs still be alive today? Would they have evolved into something even more advanced? Could humans have coexisted with them, or would we have been their next meal? This is What Ifs, and today, we're exploring a world where dinosaurs never went extinct. 66 million years ago, the Earth was ruled by dinosaurs of all shapes and sizes. They were intelligent, adaptable, and some of them were so enormous that they weighed as much as 2 jet planes. It's hard to believe that one single event wiped them all out. But, of course, this wasn't just any event. It was a catastrophe of planetary proportions. The asteroid that ended the reign of the dinosaurs was 9 miles wide and struck Earth with a force of 10 billion Hiroshima bombs. The resulting radioactive shockwave obliterated everything in its path, stretching for hundreds of miles in every direction. In a matter of moments, 75% of all species on Earth were gone. Now, imagine if things had played out differently. What if that asteroid had struck just a little earlier or a little later? What if it had landed just a few miles off course? If any of these variables had changed, we might be living in a very different world today. That fateful rock impacted the shallow waters of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. But if it had landed further offshore, in a deeper part of the ocean, the water might have absorbed some of the blast, lessening its devastating effects on the global climate. In this alternate reality, dinosaurs might have had a fighting chance. But even if they survived the asteroid, their challenges wouldn't have ended there. Over the next millions of years, they would have had to adapt to a rapidly changing Earth. Fast forward 55 million years, and the world would be much hotter, with global temperatures averaging 8 degrees Celsius higher than today. Rainforests would flourish, providing an abundance of vegetation, allowing herbivorous dinosaurs to thrive. However, their new plant-based diet would have been less nutritious than before, meaning many of them would likely have shrunk in size to conserve energy. Then, around 20 million years later, South America and Antarctica split apart, leading to a cooler and drier global climate. Dinosaurs would have had to adapt again, this time evolving into faster, more agile species that could roam the massive grasslands that stretched across the world. Compared to the mammals of that era, dinosaurs had significant advantages: better eyesight, stronger teeth, and a head start in evolution. In fact, some scientists believe that if dinosaurs had never gone extinct, mammals, including humans, might never have evolved at all. Imagine a world where dinosaurs still roamed the Earth. It's highly likely that large modern-day mammals, elephants, lions, and bears, would never have had the chance to evolve, as they would have been nothing more than prey for these prehistoric titans. But let's assume humans somehow survived alongside dinosaurs. Could we have coexisted? Well, humans managed to evolve and thrive alongside some pretty ferocious predators, including woolly mammoths and saber-toothed cats. While these creatures didn't survive the ice ages of 2.6 million years ago, there's a chance that some dinosaurs could have persisted, evolving into smaller, more adaptable versions of themselves. But how would humans have fared against huge, terrifyingly fast dinosaurs? They say running keeps you warm, but in this scenario, it might just make you look tastier. In an alternate timeline, if we did survive, it's possible that T-Rexes and other large dinosaurs would now be living in protected reserves, much like the ones in Jurassic Park. However, human population growth and excessive hunting would have taken their toll, likely driving many of the largest dinosaurs to the brink of extinction. Today, they would almost certainly be endangered species, their populations dwindling as human expansion pushed them out of their natural habitats. But maybe, just maybe, some dinosaurs would have found ways to survive among us. In fact, some actually have. Ever wondered where pigeons came from? Believe it or not, they descended from dinosaurs. It's hard to imagine that the tiny birds pecking at crumbs in city parks were once part of a lineage that produced fearsome, biplane-sized reptiles. But then again, it's hard to believe that with just a slight twist of fate, we might have walked among dinosaurs, or worse, become their prey, and never evolved at all. Seeing is believing in what-ifs. So, if you love exploring the incredible possibilities of our world, stick around, because the next adventure is just beginning. An ancient beast lurks in the depths of the ocean. It's twice the size of a T-Rex, its massive jaws could crush a car, and now, it's on the hunt. For over 2 million years, megalodon sharks have been extinct. But today, we're bringing these apex predators back to wreak havoc. Some people believe that megalodons never truly disappeared, that instead, they've been lurking in the darkest, deepest parts of the ocean, like the Mariana Trench. But if megalodons were still alive today, that's the last place you'd find them. Why? Because these prehistoric giants despised cold water. They thrived in the warmer waters of the Mediterranean and the Caribbean. They also loved hunting along the coasts of Australia and California, making them an absolute nightmare for beachgoers. If these monstrous predators still existed, your dream vacation by the ocean might turn into a horrifying experience. But don't panic just yet. If a megalodon spotted you swimming, it wouldn't immediately attack. and that's because of your size. Megalodon sharks were colossal, measuring at least 16 meters in length, meaning they required a staggering amount of food just to survive. Scientists estimate that a megalodon had to consume 1,200 kilograms of fish every single day to meet its caloric needs. They didn't just feast on fish either, they hunted whales and dolphins too. So, as a lone human swimmer, you might not seem worth their effort. But if you were floating in a group, well, that's an entirely different story. A megalodon could easily devour you and all your friends in a single bite. And let's not forget about those terrifying teeth. Each one of these prehistoric predators had giant, razor-sharp teeth, each as big as your hand. Unlike humans, megalodons never had to worry about dental issues. They constantly grew and replaced their teeth every week or two, going through up to 40,000 teeth in a lifetime. If they were still around today, you'd find their massive teeth scattered across the ocean floor, along with some huge carcasses. But that wouldn't happen too often. Scientists believe that megalodons could have had lifespans of up to 100 years. That means, even if humans weren't their primary target, their insatiable appetite would still have devastating consequences for us. With giant predators dominating the oceans, there would be barely any fish left for humans to catch. Not because our boats couldn't find anything, but because megalodons would get to them first. These creatures would hunt down, attack, and consume everything in sight. It's still unclear why megalodons went extinct in the first place. Some scientists believe that the oceans became too cold for them to survive. But if they were alive today, they'd be in for a real treat because, thanks to climate change, the oceans are warming up. A hotter ocean would be perfect for megalodons, allowing them to thrive, reproduce, and expand their population. As their numbers skyrocketed, they would begin to disrupt global shipping routes, endanger fishermen, and potentially bring an end to the cruise industry altogether. But even megalodons might not survive forever. Eventually, they could wipe out their own food sources, leaving nothing left to hunt. Without enough to eat, they would slowly die out once again, but not before they reshaped the oceanic ecosystem forever. Then again, maybe the real extinction event wouldn't happen to them, it would happen to us. With rising global temperatures, escalating climate disasters, and the return of the deadliest predator the ocean has ever known, humanity might find itself on the losing side of evolution. And if that's the case, then maybe, just maybe, we'd be the ones to go extinct this time. Extinct? Sometimes it's nice to just kick back and take things slow, really slow. But what if evolution had the same approach? What if it had taken its sweet time before deciding to wipe out some prehistoric creatures? Now, imagine for a moment, what if the giant sloth was still roaming the earth today? How would it adapt to life in the 21st century? Could modern humans even handle these massive, slow-moving beasts? And most importantly, what does any of this have to do with your guacamole? Well, get ready because this is going to be one wild, prehistoric ride. What would happen if giant sloths never went extinct? Well, for starters, they'd be a lot like their modern-day relatives, slow, harmless, and, let's be honest, pretty adorable. But there's one major difference. They would be massive. And when we say massive, we mean really massive. These giant, lumbering titans could have reached up to 7 meters tall and weighed over 6,300 kilograms. They first appeared in South America around 35 million years ago, and thanks to some well-preserved specimens, we actually have a pretty good idea of how they lived. That is, until about 11,000 years ago, when the Ice Age sealed their fate. But let's imagine for a moment, that wasn't how the story ended. What if they stuck around? If these gentle giants were still roaming the earth today, they'd likely be chilling in the forests and bushy landscapes of North and South America, turning these regions into their own personal, all-you-can-eat vegan buffet. Being herbivores, they would stand up on their massive hind legs, using their thick, powerful claws to grasp tree branches and feast on leaves. Some even had giraffe-like tongues, perfect for reaching those extra tasty, hard-to-get snacks. And they'd need every last bite, because a giant sloth's daily diet would require a whopping 60,000 calories. That's the same as an African elephant's meal plan. So, Even in the 21st century, these slow-moving, food-loving creatures would still be living their best, laid-back lives. But what about us? How would humans interact with these prehistoric behemoths? Well, knowing us, we'd probably put them to work. Maybe we'd try using giant sloths for transportation until we realized that wasn't the best idea. Let's face it, nobody's getting anywhere fast on a sloth ride. Some of the larger species were about the size of an ox, so maybe we could try using them on farms, perhaps plowing fields using the classic carrot dangling trick. But then again, would anyone actually invest in a work sloth? Probably not, considering speed and efficiency aren't exactly their strong suits. So, what else could they contribute? Surprisingly, their biggest impact might have been avocados. Yes, avocados. People love them, but giant sloths really loved them. In fact, they could eat up to 200 avocados a day. It's estimated that if 880,000 giant sloths were still roaming the planet, they'd be consuming as many avocados each year as the entire United States. Now, you might be wondering, how is that helpful? Well, ever heard of Kopi Luwak, the world's most expensive coffee? It's made when civet cats eat coffee beans, allowing their digestive enzymes to work their magic while passing them out the other end. This process changes the flavor profile, making the coffee highly sought after and very expensive. So, imagine if we did the same thing but with avocado pits. Since giant sloths were such avid avocado lovers, they could have played a key role in creating a whole new gourmet delicacy. Picture this, a luxury avocado farm, powered by giant sloths, producing the world's most exclusive guacamole. With a never-ending supply of fresh fertilizer, it might just be the perfect business model. But as fascinating as that sounds, sadly, it's just a dream. Giant sloths are long gone, and unless science pulls off some groundbreaking genetic experiments, they're going to stay that way. But hey, what if we could bring them back? Now, that's a question for another time. A team of Russian scientists is hard at work, attempting to resurrect one of the most iconic creatures of the Ice Age. Give me a high five. But what if they never disappeared in the first place and were still roaming the Arctic regions today? What would they eat? Would we hunt them for their tusks? And most importantly, how would they have adapted to the modern world? These shaggy-haired herbivores, known as woolly mammoths, are actually cousins of the modern-day Asian elephant. Weighing in at nearly 6 metric tons and standing 3 to 4 meters tall, they were large, but maybe not as mammoth as we often imagine. In reality, they were similar in size to the African elephant. Surprisingly, woolly mammoths only went extinct about 10,000 years ago, and their fossils have been found across North America, Asia, Europe, and even Africa.
So, what happened to them?
Woolly mammoths were built for the Arctic cold, and they thrived during the Ice Age, thanks to their unique circulatory system. Unlike humans, their countercurrent blood flow kept them warm by circulating venous blood through the heart and lungs, while arterial blood traveled through their legs and feet. This system worked like natural antifreeze, allowing them to maintain body heat while surviving on limited calories. And let's not forget their thick coat. Their fur could grow up to 1 meter long. Truly woolly indeed. But was climate change to blame for their extinction? Scientists are still debating this question. Some believe that rising temperatures led to the disruption of their habitat, while others argue that human hunting played a major role in their demise. Most likely, it was a combination of both. But what if they had somehow survived? Our Arctic regions would look very different today, not just because massive, shaggy animals would be roaming the tundra, but also because the entire ecosystem would have evolved differently. With mammoths still around, there would likely be fewer elk, moose, and caribou, as they would have to compete with these giant herbivores for food. Woolly mammoths consumed about 225 kilograms of plants daily, using their huge tusks to push aside snow and access the frozen grass underneath. Interestingly, their grazing habits could have shaped the Arctic landscape. By compacting the soil, they would have created grassland environments rather than the tundra we see today. This, in turn, could have prevented greenhouse gases from being released, as the frozen ground would remain intact for longer periods. But how would woolly mammoths have adapted to modern climate change? Well, They would need to adjust to the warmer temperatures and outcompete other grazers for food. Being big and bulky has its advantages, but it also requires a lot of energy, which could become a vulnerability in a changing environment. Over time, mammoths might have evolved to be smarter, possibly even shedding some of their thick fur to adapt to the heat. And then there's the ivory trade. Even today, melting permafrost is revealing well-preserved mammoth tusks, which are worth around $1,000 per kilogram. This highly sought-after ivory is often exported to China, where it's used for traditional medicine, jewelry, and ornaments. If woolly mammoths were still alive, they would be at serious risk of being hunted for their valuable tusks. To protect them, strict legal enforcement would be necessary, but even with these efforts, their population would likely remain low.
Why?
Because mammoths reproduce very slowly. A female mammoth wouldn't reach sexual maturity until around 15 years old, and her pregnancy would last a whopping 22 months, only producing one calf at a time. That's a slow recovery rate for a species that would be facing constant threats. But here's the thing, scientists are actually trying to bring them back. Using resurrection biology, researchers around the world are working on the de-extinction of woolly mammoths. While none of these efforts have been completely successful yet, it does raise an interesting question. Should we even be trying? Sure, it sounds amazing to see these prehistoric giants roam the earth again, but we have no idea what kind of ripple effects this could have on ecosystems. And let's be real, human history doesn't exactly have the best track record when it comes to bringing back extinct creatures. Ever heard of Jurassic Park? Perhaps a better use of our energy would be to focus on protecting their closest relatives, the Asian elephants. Instead of trying to resurrect the past, we could work on saving the species that still exist today and ensuring they have safe, wild habitats where they can thrive without the threat of illegal hunting. After all, what do woolly mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, and the dodo all have in common? They're all extinct, and some scientists believe humans played a major role in that. But what if we could undo our mistakes? What if we could actually bring back these creatures? Is that even scientifically possible? And more importantly, would humans still remain at the top of the food chain? One day, this might not be just a hypothetical. Scientists are getting closer to de-extinction, a process that was once science fiction but is slowly becoming a reality. However, there's one big catch. You won't be seeing any dinosaurs.
Why?
Because for de-extinction to work, scientists need usable DNA, and DNA only remains readable for about 1 to 2 million years. Unfortunately, the dinosaurs that went extinct 65 million years ago are far too old for this process. Sorry, dino lovers. No real-life Jurassic Park for us. But some species are young enough for de-extinction. One example, woolly mammoths. Some small populations of mammoths were still around just 3,600 years ago, and experts believe they could have survived if it weren't for human hunting. Scientists are now exploring ways to bring them back, possibly by combining their DNA with modern elephants. Over thousands of years, this could lead to the return of mammoths to the wild. But if we can bring back mammoths, why stop there? Imagine seeing a 12-foot-tall short-faced bear, hairless dogs, or even the adorable dodo bird walking among us again. Of course, we'd also have to be very cautious of creatures like saber-toothed tigers. You definitely wouldn't want to run into one of those. And if we wanted to get really weird, we could even revive Neanderthals. But let's be honest, that's probably a terrible idea. They wouldn't survive our diets, our germs, or modern diseases. In fact, they might not last very long at all. And that goes for all of these resurrected animals. Sure, in theory, they could adapt over time, but there are so many risks involved. One of the biggest concerns? How would we control them? For example, what if a short-faced bear started mating with modern bears? That could create a whole new set of issues that science isn't prepared to handle. So, what's the point of bringing back extinct species? Is it really just for our own entertainment? Couldn't these creatures disrupt our current ecosystems, causing even more extinctions? That said, there is one potential benefit, bringing back essential species that are facing extinction today. For example, if bees ever go extinct, de-extinction technology could be used to save them. But would this lead people to be careless about conservation, thinking it's okay for species to disappear since we can just bring them back? At the end of the day, bringing back extinct species might sound like a dream, but the risks and unpredictability are far too great. Maybe it's best to focus on protecting what we have now, rather than trying to rewrite history.